Hi there! So, we're finally here. Only a few weeks left till Canto 8, huh? I'm excited. You excited? Yeah, you are. So, anyways, welcome to the Abnormality Room, and let's talk about Season 6's newest ego. This season, titled
葬花吟
or The Son of Buried Flowers, looks very cool, and I'm very intrigued to what's to come when Canto 8 comes out in about 2 weeks as of the time when the video comes out. Now, as of writing this, no other egos have been announced for other characters, other than the one announced in the teaser with Han Lu, which is the one we're going to talk about. And also, we'll mention Sinclair briefly since he is obviously going to get the ego that Han Lu has, but the video is majority focused on Han Lu, and the ego, and the abnormality shown, so here's how the video will go. I will start with analyzing yin and yang, both the mythological concept of it and the two abnormalities the ego may come from, unless it's an aberration. We'll talk about that in a bit. After that, we'll talk about the dragon that the two make, and then try to relate that to Han Lu and Sinclair. So sit back, relax, and be ready, because this video is definitely a long one. So, I guess to start off, we can start with yin and yang. Not the abnormality though, but its philosophy or Taoism, which in simple terms is a tradition of understanding the nature of the universe. Now, this isn't the focus, but yin and yang are part of it, so might as well just mention it. So, yin and yang, what is it? A lot of people may think that yin and yang are merely just representations of opposites, good versus evil, fire versus ice, light versus dark, etc. But that's just the broad ideas of it. It's not wrong, but the details kind of just make that statement naturally wrong. It's not just good versus evil, it's the intersection of both concepts being relative, where every good can have a tad bit of evil inside and every evil can have a tad bit of good. It won't be the strong part of it, but it exists. And it's not even just good and evil, it's a lot of things. It's actions, it's personalities, it's traits. A lot of things can be categorized into either being yin or yang. Maybe even everything. Yang can be more active, positive, strong, like light itself, while yin is more passive, soft, dark, like a shadow. Which actually, by the way, let's put a pin on that and we'll come back to that later. The curve itself shows how one thing can instantly change. It's very complicated, and I don't personally want to go too deep into this sort of concept. As much as I want to have this video be very long, all that you really need to know is that everything has some sort of positive and negative aspect to all those things. For example, a knife can be used as a kitchen tool from Yan's perspective, but can be used as a weapon from Yin's perspective. But despite that, the kitchen tool can still be used to injure, and as a weapon, it can be used for self-defense. Again, very complicated, but also simple. Pin that as well, I guess. Now, despite all of that, the main thing that I think everyone can get is that yin and yang are always together. They represent harmony and balance. Balanced, how all things should be. Because as far as I know, I've covered the both of them as separate as I can. A lot of it are still related to each other deeply. So to mention again, yin is black, yang is white. But together they are, what, gray? But yeah, follow the flow, keep the balance, etc. Virgilius, my man, probably understands that well, maybe. But since we're talking about the game now, let's move on from the mythological concept and flow onwards towards the lobotomy corporation. That also represents said complex concept, but in a different way. You know, I talked about how yin and yang are also interconnected and are relative to each other, right? Well, let me tell you that all of this goes out of the window in lobotomy corporation, since in the game, they are now separated. O-05-102 and O-07-103 are WoW level abnormalities, with one being an actual abnormality that we can interact with, and the other being a tool abnormality. Look, as much as I despise some of the tool abnormalities, this is a topic for a separate video. I do have to talk about yang, so oh well. Let's start off with yin. Yin, as said multiple times, is the darker side of the pendant, described to be darker than any other shade of black, and is holding a broom for some reason. We'll probably get into that in a bit, I don't know. And it is actually a bit saddening reading its lore. So to make it short, when it was in Alcor, the employees were told not to touch it or possess it, unlike Yan, mostly because of the darkness that Yin is protruding in its aura, and many people called it the Devil's Pendant, mostly because of that aura, which also erodes its surroundings. A lot of people don't like being near it. The employees complain a lot about it, saying things such as, "We wish it was only the white one," which is fair, but the sad thing is that it isn't even their fault. We later get inside its thoughts and see what Yin thinks, which is interesting. Why do I exist? If my very existence corrodes my surroundings and brings suffering and darkness to whoever interacts with me, maybe I shouldn't have been born at all. Just like they say, maybe my creator only wanted to make the white pendant, and I'm just an unintentional accident. If so, how can such an impure being disappear from this world? So, two things. One, sad, like very sad. Imagine considering yourself as an unintentional accident because of your existence, corroding and ruining everything around you. Like, that's just fucked up, huh? But the second thing to take in from this is, who the fuck is the creator? My first thought was obviously God, but that seems a bit much, at least to me. Maybe it is a god, but I'll explain more later on, so let's add that as our third pin to remember for later. But do remember the second pin about how no matter what side of yin and yang, being good or bad, there is a tad bit of the opposite in each other. Well, I'd say that talk with yin is a very good example of showing that. But we are not removing that pin. We'll come back to it. Now, let's quickly move on to yang. I know that we are not finished with yin, but trust me, it'll make sense why I did that. Yan is the lighter side of the pendant, and as said before, is a tool, and a very interesting one at that, since this is, I believe, the only tool that can escape. I could be wrong though, Editor Crow confirmed this, okay? Thanks. Anyway, so unlike Yin, whose story is more detailed and sad, Yan is more brief and doesn't provide much attachment to it. So Yan is one of the two pairs that also misses its other half, and from the perspective of the employees, it's called the Angel's Pendant, opposite of Yin's Devil's Pendant. And because of that, a lot of people prefer to be with Yan instead of Yin, saying that they wish every abnormality was as helpful like this one, which was nice to hear, but it doesn't understand that, since it never intended to help others. That was simply what it did. It, or I assume the next quote being Yan, believes that the world is more than simply warmth and light. The sky exists, for so does the land. Darkness exists, for so does light. Life exists, for so does death. Hope exists, for so does despair. And that the black carp swims towards harmony, the white carp swims towards chaos. What will happen when the two fish meet? Now, we'll go over what will happen when the two of them meet later when we finish with the end story, but for now, let's go over a bit more of what I think the quote means. If what I assume are Yan's thoughts, I presume that Yan doesn't really care about what is, will, or has happened with it, or its surroundings. Its aura is a source of good, but it doesn't really care at the end of the day. Now let's talk about the next two parts. Now, I said that I felt like this was Yan, but the chances are it's most likely the creator instead, that is mentioned in Yan's story. Now, as much as I would like to discuss the creator again, and in a little bit more detail, let's quickly finish Yin's story before we go over the creator and his possible identity. So, we last left off at Yin's self-observation, thinking that it should not exist, that it was an accident given birth, and wanted to know how can such an impure being disappear from this world. But after that self-thinking, Yin hears a call from the white pendant Yan, saying that it is time for us to reunite, and eventually swam away from its place, leaving everything it swam through in ruin and destruction by its instinct, swimming towards the part of itself that it hadn't seen for a long time. The two opposites were swimming towards each other. For the first time ever, the black pendant felt meaning in its existence. And while Yan was swimming towards the white carp, Yan has a conversation with Yin. While swimming away, quote, "We used to be one. I am and thus you are. You are and thus I am. We were originally together. It was a fruitless deed to divide us. Now you become the sky and I the land." Which, sidetrack, it's a very cool fucking sentence. We were originally together. It was a fruitless deed to divide us. Now you become the sky and I the land. Holy fuck, that's cool. Anyways, continue on from that. While Yin was following towards Yan, everything it came through essentially became the opposite of what is happening. An employee who had a face colored with the cheerful eyes began to grimace at their sudden burst of sadness. An employee who was quietly crying from having their hearts broken dried their tears. An employee who was dragging along their broken leg stood up straight as if they always could. Now, what is happening? Well, I think that the last parts describe what is actually happening. As the end circles back to the beginning, those who held hope are met with despair, and those who held despair are met with hope. In other words, since we're nearing the end, everyone feels the opposite. You know, those that are in despair would feel hopeful for the end to come, and those that feel hopeful are now feeling despair that the end is coming. You know. So, to finally finish off their story, at the end of the beginning, the dragon, which now became a great avatar, soared through the sky. Ooh! Oh boy, was that a mouthful, huh? Anyways, let's talk about what happened in Yin's observation logs. So, in short, Yin's very sad, contemplated its existence, compared to its other half, Yan, saying it shouldn't exist, and is an accident, but eventually heard the call of its other half and left the facility to follow it, causing destruction and ruin for those that were happy and hopeful, and causing hope and happiness to those that are in despair. Eventually, they finally unite and became a dragon, or summoned the dragon. I don't know, we'll talk about that in a bit. So, Yin causes ruin, but also prevents it. Why is that? Well, I believe it's just the nature of Yin from a mythological standpoint. Or it's because Yin and Yang are causing both things to happen. Maybe. Maybe there's someone more knowledgeable in this that can tell me in the comments below. I'd really appreciate it. I'm not a genius in things like these. Also, subscribe while you're at it. Thank you. Anyways, one last thing to add before we move on to that. If you have paid attention, there is a bit of a contradiction between each other's personalities. Yin is more in despair and more nice to people despite its destructive nature, while Yan is more indifferent and doesn't really care. Why is that? Well, remember these two pins? Well, I'd say that is a part of their design. Their instinct is the major part that a lot of people will recognize them as, but their thoughts, their emotions, are represented by this tiny little dot representing their opposites, which is a very cool and minor detail that I like. So now that we have talked about them separately, let's talk about when they are united, when they become one. The dragon is definitely an interesting point to talk about. Only mentioning Yin's story as something that now became a great avatar that soared through the sky. A lot about it will absolutely be speculative, so no guarantees here. So let's start off with what this dragon is. Well, in Yin's side of the story, Yan says that Yin will become the land and Yan becomes the sky. So I doubt that Yin and Yan is the dragon, especially with the fact that they turn into fish and follow each other. Hell, when they combine, the dragon just appears from the skies and goes down to the land. Hell, Yin and Yan don't even disappear during that time until the dragon's head approaches them. Maybe it is instead consumed by the dragon. At least that's what I assume is happening. And while the dragon is going down, it's not killing any employees, but rather just reversing both their sanity and health. So if your employees are at 100%, they're essentially dead. But if they have 90%, then they aren't dead, but just have 10% HP and SP. And the reverse is also true, by the way. Not counting dead people though. So, oh well. Now, here's what I think this dragon is. I feel like it's one of two things. Either the dragon is the so-called creator, which could be Cope. So another natural thing that this dragon here is just a summon, which is a tad bit sad, but hey, it's likely. So if that is the case, then who is the creator? Well, maybe it's just Ian, maybe the outer malady is aware of its existence, or maybe I'm just coping a lot with all of this. I don't know. Also, can I say that the design is cool? Like if they ever improved their design, it would be amazing. Oh, wait a minute. Duh. Let's finally talk about the main star of Limbus Company's Canto 8, Hanlu. And Sinclair as well, I guess. So, let's start with Hanlu, since he is the main focus point, and the one we can get the most info out of. So, first of all, I guess the first question is the ego meant to be Yan, or the dragon, or even an aberration? Now, the answer to the question will come out when Sinclair's WoW ego is revealed, but for now, at least we can speculate. I presume this ego to be most likely Yan, firstly, because of a few reasons. Firstly, him being mostly white with a dark dot in his eye, similarly to Yan's design in general. Secondly, if we assume that the dragon is a separate entity to Yin and Yang and is only related to them, then I can also assume, based off of the ego's design, the corrosion would be something similar to Yan, I'd say. And if we want to assume that the dragon is the ego's abnormality, then that would make sense, since the dragon comes when Yin and Yang are in union. They are in harmony. So unless the dragon is either an aberration of Yin and Yang or completely unrelated to them, which is heavily unlikely, I'm just throwing that out there for fun, then there is little to no chance that the dragon is the source of the ego, and it's Yan instead. Hell, it even makes sense that Hanlu would be Yan, and not the both of them combined, since if we take from what we have talked about for the past 16 minutes about Yan, with it being more positive from the outside but negative on the inside, it makes sense why Hanlu would be Yan. Hanlu as a character is all positive and happy-faced on the outside, but in his inner thoughts and mindscape, he's depressed, and has a lot of wrath in him. Essentially, he's nihilistic as fuck. And I guess since I mentioned wrath, I might as well talk talk about Sinclair. Sinclair as a character absolutely fits the Infor's ego. Negative on the outside, but on the inside, he's a good kid and wants the best for everyone, despite being a stuttering bitch. So him getting the Discord ego also makes sense, just as how Hanlu's ego also makes sense. Hell, them being yin and yang makes sense as a whole. They were together in the Inaralo and had a whole topic about the emotion of wrath and its potential meaninglessness, an emotion that erupts in flames. I feel like if the ego had a sin affinity, wrath would fit if we're talking about characters, but if we're talking the most likely option, I'd say gloom is most likely a sin affinity to fit in with the egos. Or even both, like wrath sin for Sinclair's Discord ego and gloom for Hanlu's, what, accord? Harmony? What's a good name that is opposite of Discord? Maybe Accord, I don't know. But yeah, if there's one other thing that I can wish is that if you want the dragon to appear in this ego, then I feel like to make that happen then is to just use the yin ego and then the yang ego, or vice versa, and then a follow-up attack happens with the dragon. Maybe. It'll have a lot of restriction though, I imagine. Being forced to use Sinclair and Hanlu just to get the dragon would be a bit of a bad thing. Hell, recently a lot of the team restrictions, like Blood Fiends, Mao Branch, or the middle IDs, are certainly interesting. So having the restriction on ego combinations would also be interesting, I guess. Unless there was a better way to use the dragon. Do tell me though. We'll have to see that eventually when Canto 8 is entirely done. So what now? I can predict Canto 8, but to be honest, just watch Velveter's prediction. A lot of my thoughts are somewhat the same as his, despite me not knowing anything that is in Dreams of the Red Chamber. But if there's anything that I can add to it is, I hope this rich boy fucking distorts and breaks. And we need to see some Sinclair X Hanlu fan. Anyways, this video is long enough as it is, so subscribe and bye.